How does it taste?
What? It's
Cherry bomb.
you know what? It's an energy drink. You know, that's how I would describe that.
Oh, do you know what? That's unreal.
You like that?
That is actually
You like the
beautiful.
cherry sweets?
Oh, that's unreal.
I didn't
I
expect
do love the
such
cherry
a
flavor.
positive reaction to that.
Did you not? I love like Dr Pepper. Unreal.
It smells a bit like
That
Dr.
tastes
Pepper.
like
Interesting smell.
it tastes like a cherry fucking chupa chop.
Sweet.
Yeah. Is it
Oh, you mean like the
lollipops? Are they
lollipops?
called chupa chops?
Chopper chops.
Yeah.
Chopper chops.
Chopper chops, chupa chups, whatever.
I used to flip them back in the day in school.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming back on, bro. A lot's actually happened also. Well, basically, we filmed a full podcast and I fucked it. Didn't record the audio, so this time everything's all sweet. But yeah, lots happened since, what was it, 2 weeks ago that we filmed?
The 6th. So yeah, a couple
Yeah.
of weeks, 2 weeks, 2 whole weeks. And every time I went to message you on Instagram, we had a few things to discuss. I said, stem it.
Yeah.
We'll get round to that on part 2. So, and when you messaged me, as soon as I saw a voice note, I knew there was something.
Oh, mate,
I knew
I
there
was
was something
wounded.
up. And the first thing I said to you, don't stress. I've been in that position before. And it was even what we were talking about on the other podcast in regards to just making mistakes. It happens. You have to iron these things out. So it's no problem at all. It's any excuse to get back on the sofa and have a
100%.
chat. So it's
And
all
also,
good.
like we were discussing in that first podcast that we did about like the perfectionism of like, I could have probably put it out because there was audio there, but for that like crisp, yeah, you just need to, sometimes you need to perfect things,
True.
which is a good and a bad thing. You just came back from Amsterdam. How was it?
Incredible place, actually, to be perfectly honest. It's such an interesting city because it just has so many different aspects to it in regards to culture. You have the food scene, obviously you have the coffee shop scene, but then you've got the actual architecture of the place, and you have the canals, and you have the whole bike system, which, as you know, anyone that's been, is an absolute conundrum at the best of times.
Oh, it's so overwhelming sometimes.
Ridiculously overwhelming, ridiculously overstimulating, but it just has different elements that not many other cities have. And the fact that it's a 50-minute plane ride from here, it's cheap to get out there. It's relatively cheap even when you are there. So yeah, I had a super fun time.
Depends on where you go, to be fair.
True.
Yeah.
Like anywhere.
Yeah.
I do always say that. It just depends how you sort of want to go about it. But I was out there semi for a sort of a break, but it was more so filming some food content for the Food Fighters because I'm going to be doing some work with an MMA organization out there called LFL, who are based in Amsterdam. So I wanted to record some content for them before I even went. And then probably in April time, I'm going to fly back out there and actually cover the event.
Nice.
And then sort of mash the two together. Because it was sort of what we were talking about before, even in regards to making content and how to make content and finding your angle and your niche and things like that. And I was out there and I was thinking, what kind of stereotypical lane do I create content around? And I just thought, it doesn't even matter. I've curated my own brand for this exact reason. So just go out and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. So I sort of did a 24 hours in Amsterdam sort of thing so that anyone that goes to that event or goes to one of those shows can sort of watch that and get a little bit of inspiration. But yeah, it was very fun, mate. It was very fun, to say the least.
Amsterdam's a cool place. I've been a few times now. My friend Luigi, he lives in Amsterdam. Was it cold? Because I've been seeing his videos.
Freezing.
Because he's been doing this challenge where he's doing all January, every single day, jumping in the lake first thing in the morning, frozen lakes, and it's been like negative temperatures. But Amsterdam's also beautiful when it snows and stuff. I've never been there when it snows, but I've seen visually photos and stuff. But yeah, back to what you were saying about like content and making content out there. I think that's so important for you to just do what you want to do. And like kind of not follow the trend, because you kind of want to follow trends sometimes to obviously jump on the things at the right time. But you want to create your own lane and do things you want to do. Because ultimately, if you're doing something that you feel like you have to do because you feel like this is the way you should go down, even though you're not necessarily certain on it, then you're not going to, number one, you want to enjoy the content that you're making as much as if you're doing something that you're 100% in. And I feel like it can be very obvious when you're not 100%
very true
on something that you're making. Like this week past, obviously I went to Ngannou Joshua, and then I also went to the Magnificent Seven press conference that's run by Queensbury, and went down there. Obviously, like had a sick time. The press conference was pretty good, but I didn't film. Like I could have got some interviews with some fighters, but then like I'm more of an MMA guy, and I didn't want to just jump on doing interviews with people just for the sake of doing it, because I'm like, well, it's kind of almost a bit of a disrespect to the fighters, and then also it's like, well, I don't want to just force myself to do something just for the sake of doing it, because it's not natural.
I spoke to you last time. We had a chat about wanting to create somewhat of a digitally scalable educational series or course, and TikTok now have opened up a series where you can attach that digital course or series of videos to every video. So I actually spoke about it before, but I went away and spent a week or 2 weeks sort of curating a laundry list of videos of essentially questions I always get in my live streams off of videos when I'm interviewing people. How did you get there? How did you do that? How did you get that opportunity? So I've sort of collated everything that I got asked and reverse engineered that into how to create an MMA brand from scratch and build opportunities. And it was exactly like what you're speaking about there in regards to, there was a lot of, again, reverse engineering hobbies and interests and things like that to actually find where your lane is with audience. And an important thing which I learned at the start of when I started creating content, I think a lot of people get stuck when they don't know exactly. And I was 100% there. I didn't know exactly what lane I wanted to go within MMA. And I remember, I think it was Gary Vee saying, if you don't know what lane to pick, learn how to gain attention. Attention is currency in this world, and it's very, very true. So if you can start at least doing that, then at least you get some skin in the game, you get some reps creating content and things like that. But as time goes on and you refine your image, you refine what you enjoy, and you actually find where you sort of can find little pockets within the space. For me, that looked like food things. It looked like more traveling and stuff like that, which is nothing super crazy or super new, but it was just a little bit maybe different for the segment. But it's 100% what you said. It shows in the work. The passion shows in the work. And more so than that, a couple of times I kept having these internal conversations with myself, almost referencing back to how should I do this, or how would this work, or how do other people do it? And then I have to reality check myself and say, this is exactly why I created this brand in the first place, is to do whatever I want. And as stupid and as simple as that is, you have to remind yourself very often, oh, this is mine and I can do what I want, and you have that freedom to do that. As you said, there is nuances to that, because you do want to sort of, they call it trend hacking, which is essentially just picking up on more trending topics, more so than that. But yeah, I think it's important to always actually think, well, what do I actually want to do? Because like you said, it always shows in your work. And I've been in that spot as well before when I've been at events that maybe it's boxing or maybe I don't know it as well. When I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have the value, I don't believe, or I don't even have the insight to give any value to this industry here. So like you said, you sort of sit tight and think, right, I'll probably sit this one out and maybe I'll take some photos or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to life, isn't it? Like as you're figuring out your creative style, it's kind of you're figuring out yourself as well. Like we're still so young, we're still like early 20s. So it's hard to necessarily know specifically kind of what lane you're creating as you're doing it. It's kind of the same as life. You're just kind of figuring it out as you go. And I feel like, I don't know whether you've had this yet, but I feel like especially doing MMA content and like interviewing fighters or just making videos around the fight game. Like I've had certain brands that have come to me and kind of made it out as if like for me to work with them, like they want you to choose all the people that they get, like that they get on. And like, obviously that again comes with making sure you remember, like you're saying, that you want to do what you want to do. It's not like, okay, yeah, you want to maybe have brands get involved and you could potentially get money, but then how much does that weigh up against you kind of letting that brand decide what content you're making as opposed to...
True. And there's a fine balance, right? Especially at the start when maybe you're looking to monetize platforms and maybe you don't have any money coming in whatsoever. When people start entering that conversation and when money talk enters that conversation, it can definitely sort of change your perspective. And I think sometimes you have to be flexible, but again, it's just a balance and there's really no set answer to it, but you have to be flexible to staying within yourself and doing things you enjoy. You're not essentially selling out, but sometimes you do have to take opportunities which maybe don't align to exactly what you want to do, if that makes sense. I think just what you touched upon there earlier, a book which I got recommended a long time ago, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and just such an incredible entrepreneur, but philosopher as well. And there's a lot of sort of old Buddhist wisdom put in quite simple ways, really, there, in quite digestible ways. And one thing always sticks out to me, which reminded me of what you just said, is be the best in the world at what you do and refine that until that is true. And it's one of those books that you sort of read, and at different points in your journey, whether it's your business, whether it's your career, whatever it may be, even your life situation, relationships, whatever it may be, each little segment always has a different meaning. You revisit it, always has a different meaning. And the first time I read that book, it just didn't make a ton of sense, but there was some value in it. And it's even sentences like that. Now I understand the value of it. Best in the world. How can I be the best in the world? I'm not really that good at anything. But you start realizing, refine that till it's true. I'm not the best in the world at photography. I'm not the best in the world at videography or interviews or writing poems or going to shows and documenting it or making food videos. But there's not many people doing all of those things together. More so, there's no one doing Casual's Corner, if that makes sense. And it's just sort of understanding that you can refine whatever if we're talking brands here, we're talking businesses, is essentially what we're sort of referring to here. Just keep refining that. It's like we spoke about before, Joe Rogan. How do you define Joe Rogan? He's not the best commentator. He's not he's not the best podcaster. He's up there, but he's everything, right? He's a hunter. He's a father. He's a podcaster. He's a comedian, mixed martial artist, right? He's the best version of that Joe Rogan, right? And I think that's where it comes back to that fine balance. It's about taking inspiration from other people, for sure. It's about trying new things, for sure. But it's understanding there's a sort of a beauty in being able to tap into different elements, if that makes sense.
Just hold on a second, mate. I don't know what the fuck that buzzing sound's coming from.
The little mini fridge going in overdrive. No one's drinking cold wine this week.
You are.
I said no one's drinking cold wine this week.
No. But yeah, you're 100% right. And also, I think a lot of people can sometimes expect everything to kind of come very quickly. And it's almost kind of what it was making me think about today, funnily enough, with Raquel Pennington, who won last night. And I think she's just set the record for the longest amount of fights taken to get to a belt. She took her 14 years to become a UFC champion. I don't know whether that's her 14 years in the UFC or 14 years as a mixed martial artist, but it just does go to show, like, to kind of get to what you think is the place you want to get to, sometimes will just take years and years and years of sacrifice, years of taking L's and restarting and regrouping and getting it right and getting it wrong and getting it right and getting it wrong. And as long as I think you can understand that, I think that is key to kind of just making, almost always having that faith inside you that say, okay, when things don't go your way, it's not a problem. We'll regroup. Instead of letting like one thing kind of defeat you and expecting everything to be plain sailing and get it all right.
I think the thing with that as well is, it's sort of what I even spoke about. It's funny, you keep touching on points that I've been doing in these video slides. I think the first thing with that, first and foremost, is perspective of what is the overarching goal, really. Because if your overarching goal is I want to create a small community of like-minded sports enthusiasts to chat about the sport with, well, if you prioritize that, probably in not a very long time of 6 months, you could probably achieve that. If your overarching goal is I want to create a media empire and I want to do this full time and I want to be a household name, then you have to understand, I think when I came into this industry, I said from the get, this is a 10 plus year plan. And it sounded stupid. I had no followers. I had no idea what I was doing. I had absolutely no knowledge or skin in the game. I've never even really watched MMA. But I think understanding that is, does your goal align to a specific timeline is very important, right? And it's sort of even more than that, how much of a priority is it? I think this is where people, sometimes it gets a bit misaligned as well, is sometimes people have that particular goal. Okay, let's say I want to create a media empire within this sport. Well, if it's relatively low on your priority list and a lot of other things in your life take precedence over that, yes, it may take a long time, but it may likely never happen at all, if that makes sense. So I think it's sort of a fine balance. And it makes me think of a quote from Ali Abdaal, who is a fantastic content creator. He was actually a doctor, and then he started making YouTube videos, and now he's a absolute giant in the space of YouTube. But he said a quote once, which I really liked, which is, your internal reality lags 2 years to your external reality. And I thought about that the other day, because that couldn't be more true. If I put myself in the same position I am but 24 months ago, in my head I was saying, okay, I'm going to create in-person Food Fighter episodes with people within the industry. I'm going to travel around the world with UFC fighters, documenting them. I'm going to travel to different countries and call it work. I said all these things to myself 24 months ago. And then I fast forward, my external reality now matches that. So it was almost scary how linear that was. But then again, it comes back to what I said. You have to preface that with how much of a priority was that? Because I dropped everything for that. Literally everything. And we spoke about it before, but even where we are at the moment, we're scratching the surface. We've not even begun. We are literally at the first step of a 10+ year plan. We haven't even begun. But even that, up until this point, that has taken precedent and priority of everything in my life, not just things here and everything in my life. The cliche of missing birthdays and missing events and not going for dinners and people going out for Christmas, all of these things.
It's that social pressure, isn't it? It's
100%.
It's and that can be, I mean, it's almost in anything that you want to achieve in life, whether you're a fighter, it's the same thing as you miss all these things, or no matter what you are, when you're focused on something and you're what's the word I'm looking for? When you're driven to get to somewhere and to achieve something and you become obsessed, you will take those sacrifices and you will miss those birthdays, you will miss those social gatherings, and you won't succumb to the social pressure of, oh, come on, you can come out, you spend a few hours, relax. And there is also a balance, don't get me wrong, but
true.
I always come back, and you're a very philosophical person. I can tell, but I mean, I agree. I think for me, the one thing that I always can kind of come down to in anything that I do is, how much do you want it? How much do you want something? What are you willing to do to get that? What are you willing to sacrifice? And those are the questions you have to ask yourself when you're going for something. Because if it isn't worth the sacrifice, then you're probably in the wrong thing.
I think sometimes with that as well, again, these are just sort of, it's funny because I feel like we're going through all the slides I've been talking about one by one. It's actually kind of funny, but it's so fresh on my head. But I think a really, really important thing, which I actually learned in the personal training industry when I was a personal trainer, as I got a little bit more experienced in that field, you deal with so many different people that have so many different goals. You have people that are 60 plus that want to be a little bit fitter so that they can play with their grandkids. And then on the flip side, you have a 25-year-old fella who wants to get in the best shape of his life because he's going Ibiza with the boys and he wants to get diced and shredded, right? So you're dealing with so many different people. And I think the main question, whether it's something like that in the fitness industry or whether it's something in business or building a brand or whatever it may be, is, you said there, how much do you want it? But I think if you go another level, what is your why? When you realize, when you actually truly understand why, and you actually understand what that is, everything else becomes a little bit easier to reverse engineer. Then it becomes easier to understand, right, okay, then I'm going to get a bit more of a timeline. Okay. And then even more than that, coming back to what we said, if your why is a particularly strong one, then realistically, you're going to have that high on your priorities. So they all sort of interlink. But once you sort of realize, okay, why am I actually doing this? Again, am I just trying to create a community of like-minded people? Is that my why? Then okay, we can be flexible. We can still go out to events. I can prioritize it, but doesn't have to control my life. And by the way, there's no right or wrong. I think people always look for a right or wrong, but we won't get too political here, and I'm certainly not a person to do that. But I think the problem in the entirety of the world, entirety of the internet, and I don't mean to be that what social media does now is we have an info-based algorithm. So we are shown everything we want to be shown. So we're becoming more divisive than ever. And there's no nuance to anything. And
there's balance, is there?
There's no balance.
No balance, and people
it's
just
black
don't,
or white.
People don't want to even have conversations with people they don't disagree with. Like, even like politically speaking, it's literally like no one can have a conversation. It's crazy, mate. It's actually, and it's scary because, like, I mean, going a bit off topic here, but like, if in order for us to have a peaceful world and for us to actually, strive for things that we want to have a happy life, and we want, people are going to disagree one way or the other, right? You're never going to be able to agree with everyone on this planet, but you have to be willing to have open conversations and be open enough to maybe see that you're wrong, or maybe see that even though you may not believe in somebody else's views, you can almost understand their viewpoint. And there's none of that at all. And like you're saying, the way it just keeps going and everyone just keeps on getting divided, you're seeing the rise in hate and the rise in hatred. And even just like on social media, how many times do you see it? To be fair, since Elon Musk bought Twitter, it's not been as bad. But before, it was literally like people would have full blown like you couldn't have any decent conversation with someone before they just kick off and just turn it into something completely nasty, when it's just like why can't you have an open conversation about political beliefs?
Well, I think the problem as well is, again, going back to it, now we live in a world with such hyper-specific algorithms which are so detailed to show us exactly who we are, what we want to see, people that agree with us, that we just create this more established echo chamber that we essentially live in. And every day, day by day, every click, every video we like, everything we watch, we just establish essentially more layers to this echo chamber. And it's harder to penetrate with other people. And that's where you get little to no nuance. And then what happens is every now and again, those people find each other and then they battle it out, and it has to be red or blue. There's no purple. So coming back to 180 of what we were saying originally, I think that's a key thing as well. A lot of people miss is there's no right or wrong. I think sometimes it's very, very easy to look online and the highlight reel of people's life that is Instagram, which is a complete farce anyway in regards to what we see on there, and everyone's guilty of it to some degree. I think sometimes people feel a pressure as if they should have a certain goal. I feel like people feel a certain pressure of, okay, I see this kid who's 21 years old and he's a multi-millionaire, and what am I doing with my life? And people keep second guessing themselves and don't actually realize they can step back and think, oh, hold up, actually, I've got a job I enjoy, I'm living in a place I like, and I go on 3 holidays a year, and I'm actually pretty happy.
It's because everyone's constantly comparing people to themselves.
Comparison is the thief of all joy. It's true though. As cliche as that is, it's so true, and it's a bit of a random side tangent, but I remember the first time that properly hit me, and it properly sunk in. I was about 16, 17, and I'd been going to the gym for a little while at this point, just most of the reason people at that age go to the gym. Hate the way they looked. Hated the way I looked. So much so. Every time I looked in the mirror, I used to think in my head when I was younger, I used to actually think, when people would ask me certain questions about getting in shape and looking better, I used to just think, without being horrible, and I don't really mean this to sound bad, I'm actually kind of glad for your sake that you're not as obsessed about looking different, because you clearly don't hate the way you look that much. And I know that sounds a really twisted way, but I used to think like that, because literally that's how I used to feel. I used to think, I hate this so much, I will do anything to change that. So I did count my calories, I did go to the gym every day. I did become somewhat obsessed, because my goal was so much to change that.
What were you so unhappy about?
Just my physique. Yeah. In truth, just hated the way hated the way I looked, was just so scrawny, so skinny. And everyone's got their thing, right? That was just my thing. I just always hated my physique. And I was particularly skinny as well,
Lanky.
Not even lanky, just scrawny. And I used to eat well and I was well fed, but I just looked malnourished. I just did not look healthy whatsoever. So I used to just hate the way I looked. But I remember walking into the gym, and like many people, you look at the person who's on the weights and are in fantastic shape, and I'm 16, 17 at the time, and they're 25 and 28 and fully developed and been going to the gym for 10 years, going back to what we said earlier with the timelines. But I remember one day I just realized, I thought, every time someone looks at me, they don't see the fact that I'm not him. They just look at what's in front of them. And I only have the power to control what's in front of them. And that's still not a fantastic mindset, because still in my head, I was still essentially doing that for other people as well as myself. But that was when I started realizing the essence of comparison really is the thief of all joy. If you keep looking externally to these other things, you are taken away from the only thing you have control of, which is yourself. And I think it's so easy to do now with business, with brand building. This person has this many followers. This person's bought this, or has achieved this in their business, or turned over this. And you're constantly just reminded of this every single day. And it's hard to reality check yourself and pin yourself in a lane and say, hold up a second, right? Everyone's running a different race.
Yeah.
Let me sit down, regather, and actually focus on what I can control and actually what I want. Because what I want is different to what you want. And is different to what other people want, which comes back to your why. Why are you doing it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. I think I was probably also a bit of I used to view things in a way of, because of the way my brain is and how like focused I am and how driven I want to have, maybe not necessarily, I'm driven to not have a normal life that scares the life out of me.
What's normal to you?
Like 9 to 5 job, just very standard, very plain Jane. And I used to just like, I used to honestly think, I was like, I just can't understand people that would want that. But like, as I've gotten older, I've just grown to understand, well, like you said, like people want different things. People are happier a lot easier than other people. Like for a lot of people, that's all they need to have a very content, happy, simple life is 9 to 5. They've got the kids, they've got the dogs, and they're not really like, maybe for example, their goal is to maybe have their kids, so then their kids can then have a different life to them. But I don't know, I always used to, not necessarily it would bug me, but I just couldn't comprehend how more people didn't think like me. Yeah, I know that might sound fucking really mad, but that was just the way I thought. And like you said, comparison is the thief of joy. I think just understanding that everyone is completely different, everyone has their own lives, and people want different things.
That's easier said than done though, right?
It is, yeah.
It's so much easier said than done. We can sit here and go, oh yeah, don't look externally, don't compare. But if someone's sitting at home, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through TikTok, and all they see are these people in phenomenal shape that are exceedingly beautiful, that are traveling the world and have millions, how can you sit there and tell someone, don't compare yourself, mate?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as straightforward as you think.
It's really not, right? It's really
Especially
not.
I think that like, I feel like the divide between the rich and poor has gotten even bigger, especially over the last few years. And I guess social media has probably made that like a lot worse as well, because you like you're saying, you'll get all these people that'll be literally the poorest parts of the world that'll be looking at other people and think, fucking hell, like, how can't I compare myself? Like you said, it's difficult.
I think as well, again, it's a really tricky thing. And I think for me personally, we spoke about it previously, but again, that book that I referenced earlier, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, just so helpful for so many of these sort of mental models, essentially, because like I said, he's an entrepreneur, but the book starts off by saying, I was once poor and unhappy, and now I am rich and unhappy. And he prides himself on the point of happiness is a skill and it can be learned. And in truth, my mum has always said that to me. Now that comes with some context, of course, that comes with some nuance, but it's what we said about before. It's the old Buddhist wisdom of reducing your desires. The desire being a social contract to not be happy until you get something. My coffee's too cold. This food is too salty. All these different small micro things we build up in our brain day on day, and they compound and compound. And we essentially just live out a life which, from the outside looking in, we're healthy. Our friends are healthy. Our family's healthy. We've got a roof over our head. We've got warm socks on. But yet we build up and compound these issues every day. And I think
first world issues really as well. That's
100%.
That's a big thing that people can.
100%.
I mean, that was one thing I really learned when I went to Brazil, was that the amount of people that fucking complain about the stupidest shit in the West is insane. Like the lack of gratefulness that people have for what they have, like you said, a roof over their head, a family that's well, they're on health as well, they're making a fair amount of money, like to complain about like the small stupid shit, and even like you said, the small little nags of, oh, my coffee's cold, my food was a bit overcooked, or this that, they all end up building such a negative
100%.
outlook on your mindset
100%.
that before you know it, 5 years has passed and you're the most negative person and you can't get out of it. The first automatic reaction is to be negative about anything. And that will never help you get through anything, being negative. Obviously, when shit isn't going well, like that's when you want to have those moments in yourself where you can have those moments of positiveness, positiveness, where you can kind of reassure yourself, okay, things are going shit, but look what I've got around me. I've still got a lot still to be grateful for. It's like even with death. Like I feel like death is
getting into it today.
Yeah, I know. but like,
we're on a somber tone on a Sunday. It was a bit more upbeat in our last conversation. We've got politics and death.
I know, mate. I know. But
20 minutes.
But the thing is, like with death, like one thing I learned about death was, obviously every circumstance is different. People deal with death in their own way, but I don't know whether it helped that I had like a lot of family members that passed away when I was really little. Like by the age of like 11, both my granddads had died. And I think not that you become numb to death, but you kind of just accept that it's just a part of life. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but like some things I think you just have to have an outlook on life where, from my own experience at least, where it is what it is. Like that's something that I've tried to carry along with a lot of times I've had shit in my life. I was like, oh, fuck it is what it is. Like, what can you change, really? Yeah. If you can't really, there are some things in life that you can't get worked up over if you can't change it. And it's not as straightforward as that, obviously, but it is what it is.
I think like anything, right? It's building up habits, mental structures, and building up these sort of reflexes in your mind to react a certain way, right? And whatever you look like currently, whether you're quite a negative person or a positive person, it's about building these sort of structures. And touching on what we were just speaking about earlier, when it comes down to, right, limiting your desires, I think for me, that has been one of the most key things to, number one, remain better perspective of my life, and number two, be more grateful. And don't get me wrong, I'm not walking around a living saint or angel.
I'm far from having it figured out.
Of course, 100%. That always need to preface that. But the truth of it is, as I said to you before, I really do view it that way now. Am I, my family and my friends happy, healthy, safe, free, have freedom, free of speech? Yeah, cool. That's my overarching desire. So if that's not affected, my second one and my only other one is then my business. So I really only have those two. So if it sits outside of those barriers, and I mean anything, I stepped in a puddle with my sock and my foot's wet, or I banged my knee into the wall, or the train's taking 22 minutes. The smallest micro inconveniences in your life that you tell yourself is annoying, is frustrating, whatever it may be. It's just you develop this reaction. You start building it up after you start building this habit of, right, is it affecting that? No. Okay. Perspective. I can just appreciate a little bit of perspective. I can zone out a little bit. And now I'm in a position where, and I'll say, and I have to be transparent as well, that's so much easier now that I've managed to go through that phase where I had to work that horrible job, getting up at 4 a.m., getting home at 11 p.m., being in the van next to 3 sweaty geezers, not speaking to me whatsoever, on a 8-hour drive to Wales, just on my phone making crappy Instagram posts for casuals. So it's a lot easier when you're not doing that, but you've got to sort of wade through the crap for a little bit, to sort of come out on the, again,
of course,
it's sort of understanding what the why is for your brand, what the why is for your, I always had quite a big one. I always did want to create a big media outlet. I wanted to create a household name. I wanted to be able to call this a full-time living. So when you can sort of remind yourself of that, those things, like you said, it comes back to sort of how bad do you want it? You can sort of reference back to that. Because if you don't know what those answers are, when you're sitting in that car and you're tired and you haven't slept and you've been there for a 14-hour day, if you don't know what the answer is to that, I don't really know why I'm doing this, you're likely not going to do it. You're just not. Because it's not fun. It's not that interesting at the time. You're not thrilled to be doing it. So there's sometimes a misconception as well that sometimes even with these things, it's just every day, every second is super fun. It's super enjoyable. No. Sometimes you have to sort of kick yourself in gear and be like, right, okay, today's a low energy day. Let's just get the bare minimum done. I think that's a superpower in itself. 100%. I think that's a superpower in itself. And again, I always reference it, but it's true. For me, I always reference things back to the gym because a lot of these lessons were learned for me. The foundations were learned when I started going to the gym and things like that and building up that sort of career. You realize, I really can't be arsed. And you just drag yourself. Even if you have a crap session, you think, okay, that's money, water in the bank, as Teddy Atlas would say, right? So I just think that's the case as well. It's just ticking the bare minimum, just doing the bare minimum for that day. Right, that's another day done and dusted, right? And I think sometimes that's where people struggle when it gets a little bit monotonous. You're low energy. You've not had vitamin D because it's dark outside. It's cold, and you wake up and you're low energy. Just get it done. Just get the bare minimum done.
I think as well, going back to like the why, is that I think you have to. Everything's a lesson, really, isn't it? And I think, like you were saying, those days on the site and driving all those hours to Wales to do a job you don't want to do, those are all valuable life lessons and valuable
100%
moments in your life that build your character. I've done my fair share of really shit jobs, like loads of jobs that aren't fun. Like I used to work on a recycling plant, and I used to basically have all these fucking skips come in from building sites and then get chucked on the yard in the middle of summer, and then you'd have to pick with gloves that would get ripped every single day between wood, plastic and metal. And then if you weren't on there, you were in this like tiny little tin pot shed that was just a sweat box, and it'd literally be a conveyor belt of all this rubbish that had just been dumped from these skips. And like you'd see like dead animals like that. Honestly, mate, fucking awful. However, it makes you really realize that you don't want to be in that position.
Correct.
And that's also going back to, again, like the figuring out part of your life, is that sometimes you just need to go through shit to figure it out.
I think as well, we touched on it before, but I think is an important one. I think especially when people are leaving school or maybe leaving university, those sort of points in your earlier life that we're not too far removed from, where you sort of have to make a next decision or a next step. People get so caught up in the notion that they have to figure out exactly what they want to do, that sometimes they don't realize there is a superpower in doing something to realize you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be 25 years old and get stuck into a job and realize 10 years down the line, you actually really don't like to do this. It's what we spoke about before when you touched on there's value in every job, and I couldn't agree with that anymore, because from the age of 10 to now 25, I have had a job, or if not multiple, every year of my life from 10 years old. Every
10
single
years
year.
old?
10 years old.
What was your first job?
Paper round.
Paper
of course
round.
It was. The most cliche job there is. But even then, had to get up at 5, 6 in the morning. It was pitch black. I was a feeble little kid who was terrified of the dark at the point, riding my bike against, again, how cliche is this, barking dogs, like riding up hills and whatnot, and bags breaking, and it's raining, and it's 7-day-a-week job, by the way, 7 day a week for £20. So I've had, you said there about being in the factory, and likewise, done the factory work in the tin roofs. When it's summer, it's the hottest thing ever. When it's winter, it's the coldest thing ever. But I think firstly, there's value in that. There's always lessons to pick from anything. There is always lessons to pick from anything. And if nothing else, at least you've earned a pound note and you can use that leverage in somewhere else, right? And I think it's what you said there about finding out what you don't want to do. I mentioned before about, I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing, run my own business, whatever that may be. But when I got to about 15, 16, because of the area I'm from, it's very much the norm to wear a nice suit, go into the city, get a job in the finance sector, call yourself a stockbroker, right? It's trendy, it was cool, it was earned a bit of money. And I knew I never really wanted to do that, but there was this small part of me that just said, but what if you did? But what if you actually did? So I thought, okay, let me try and scratch that itch. So I remember being 16, 17 and organising, very fortunately enough, to get a work experience in Deutsche Bank. Very fortunate enough to organise a work experience in News UK, which is one of the biggest publications. So yes, I've had the bad jobs, but I've also been lucky enough to have good jobs where I've tasted both sides of it and to know, okay, I've done that for a month, 2 weeks, whatever it was, a year. I know I don't want to do that anymore. And there's a big power in that. There's a superpower in sometimes in your earlier bit of your life when you can do these things with no responsibilities to be like, actually, I don't ever want to do that again. And it gives you a little bit of direction. But I think sometimes people are so fixated on what do I exactly want to do?
And it's not a problem if you don't know. Like, that's all, like we're saying, like you have to try out things. You have to be willing to try things. I think that's the big thing. You have to be willing to try.
True.
As opposed to saying if you don't know what you want to do, but then just still saying no to everything else. It's like you kind of need to figure it out. Like some people are very fortunate in their positions where they might have a family that are fairly wealthy and they have the ability to kind of sit back a little bit more and figure it out. I guess that's where, like, say if you don't have that ability, it can be very easy for you to kind of accept, okay, well, I'm just going to get a job and build this up because I've got no choice. So I guess everyone's position is different depending on where you come from. But speaking of the why MMA? Why Casuals Corner? What's the Casuals Corner story?
As soon as you said that, my instant reaction was, it was a shower thought. It was a complete shower thought, which is true. And the why is I started watching MMA not that long ago. I am the person everyone hates in the industry because I got into it around lockdown time, which everyone
is. What was the fight that made you fall in love with MMA?
None.
Just
it was a slow grow up. I'll be honest. Yeah, it really was. One of the first fights I ever actually watched was the Ben Askren Jorge Masvidal fight. That was literally one of the first fight cards I can remember. But even then, my friend would put it on at uni. Wasn't that interested. I'd watch it. Wasn't that interested. There's a lot going on. And when you don't really know what's going on, it's almost like nothing is going on, right? Because there's so many nuances, so many details. It can get lost on the casual eye. And then lockdown happened and that was the only sport that was on. So I'd put my headphones in. I'd get some nice snacks. I'd watch it for 7-8 hours straight. And I started learning more about the sport. I started listening to the commentary, started learning a bit more about the techniques and why things were happening and why people were doing certain things. Then I started going to an underlayer and hearing people's stories and their journeys and the mindset, because it's so different in regards to it's an individual sport, which is something that I'd never really played much of as a kid because it's weird MMA because it helped me so much with mindset of competition and also just in general life. And there's so much to take. You listen to sort of champions and the way that they sort of program their mind into certain fights and whatnot, and the ability to not concentrate as much on the loss, which is a thing that I was the worst for when I was a kid. I hated competing. I played so many sports, every sport really. I hated competing.
Really? Why?
I hated it. I realize now I never wanted to fail. I never wanted to mess up. I never wanted to be the person that made the mistake. I never wanted to lose. I was super competitive, but I never wanted to lose, ever. I would be in finals for things and I would not enjoy any part of the process whatsoever because I was so caught up on you realize that fear of failure. It's only when you get older, or at least when I got older and I started learning more about the mindset within MMA and people like Volkanovski, for example, you start realizing the power of not embracing failure, but you start realizing how much that can hinder your performance, right? And how, and it really does. But why MMA? Well, I started falling in love with it through lockdown. And then slowly but surely, I started realizing, hold up, I quite enjoy this. And then there was this light bulb moment where I realized this sport is very new. This sport is super new. And yes, of course, there's a media infrastructure, but that's very new. And people are just doing very traditional means, newspapers, news outlets, articles, photography, things like that, all to a great level, don't get me wrong. But I started realizing, number one, there was space in the sport. And number two, there was this freedom to venture into different parts. And then I started playing it out in my head. And I'd never had anything, genuinely, it was a very strange thought, because you said earlier, right? You said earlier about one of the biggest fears for you when you was growing up was living that very traditional life. And again, referring back to what we said earlier, there's no right or wrong. And as you grow up, you realize there's a lot of details to that. And it isn't just normal to other people. That's what they want. But I resonate with that because I was 100% the same. And my mum even tells me when we used to have conversations at 8, 9 years old, me being 8 or 9 years old, when we was watching Dragon's Den and coming up with business ideas and things of that nature, I always knew that I just enjoyed that. That was the only thing I enjoyed. That was the only thing I sort of wanted to do. That was always just, okay, I'll do my own thing. I want my own business. But that didn't stop me having loads of jobs throughout my life because I knew that was a means to an end. But I always knew the grander picture was I was going to do something for myself. But the biggest fear for me, even when I was super young, I can remember this at even 10 years old, which is kind of strange. I just always remember thinking, I would hate to just waste potential. Waste potential is my biggest fear. And up until, well, very recently, I'd always been okay at different things, whether it was sport, whether it was business, whether it was jobs. I was always all right. I was never the worst. I was never the best. But I always had this horrible feeling deep down that I'd never fulfilled my potential in anything. I couldn't look to any piece of work, any sport, any endeavor whatsoever and say, I gave my 100% effort for that and I reaped the rewards, or at least I saw what could be the outcome. I could never say that, ever. And for the first time with mixed martial arts, and when I thought about what Casuals Corner was, I thought, I'm for the first time deeply passionate about something, that I truly actually see a journey where I can maybe look at myself in 10 years and say, okay, I gave 100% as best as I could. And I certainly, by the way, that's a always evolving process. You never give 100% the whole time, but it was certainly a journey, or at least a timeline. I thought, right, I can actually commit to this for the first time and see what I'm capable of. I just wanted to see what I'm capable of, to be honest. Whether that's not a law or whether that's ridiculous feats, I don't know. I want to find out. But I knew that MMA was the perfect medium to find out. Okay, well, and what I loved so much, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about the sport. I didn't know anything about media, creating content, platforms. I remember just writing on my board, Casuals Corner Media Outlet. Just kept writing over. And I was saying to myself, what's a media outlet? I was saying, I don't even know. I actually don't even know. I actually have no idea. But I remember just telling myself that not only am I passionate about it, but I'm excited about this because I have a complete blank slate, a complete blank canvas. So much so that when people would say to me, out of pity, oh, do you want me to drop you a follow? I say, no, it's okay. If you don't like MMA, just don't follow me. I didn't want any. Yeah. I didn't want any pity follows. I just wanted to see what the merit of my work and effort was truly capable of.
I can 100% resonate with that, mate. I hate begging for it. I'm far from that person, mate. I will not. Again, it goes back to like what are you making content for? Like, I'm not gonna just do something just to please other people. I'm gonna do it because I want to do it. I'm not going to beg for it. And sometimes not swallowing your pride, but sometimes like keeping your pride can mean that you're going to take longer to get where you want to be. But ultimately, how much is your pride worth? I think
for me as well, it's like what I said. I think there was so much flexibility in what I could do with it that I mentioned before, but it's so true. Up until 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I had this annoying feeling in the pit of my stomach. As I said, I'd never truly maximized my potential in anything. And I was always decent at many things. Again, I wasn't the best, but I certainly wasn't the worst. I was always decent at most things. But it always used to truly annoy me that I was never at something. And I used to always hear the phrase in my head, jack of all trades, master of none. And it used to bug me. And I remember sitting there in my room about a year ago, just sat on my bed. I don't remember if I was crying at that point, but there probably was a few tears because I just felt so lost, mate. I told myself I was going to create this brand. I was going to create an income from it. I was going to have all these lofty goals. And at this point, I was working a job that I hated, that was turning me into a person that I'd never even seen before. I was miserable. My health was the worst it's been, mentally, physically. I wasn't looking after my appearance. My everything just didn't really recognize myself. I'm sitting there at a sort of crossroads and I'm thinking, that thought's coming back into my head, that just jack of all trades, master of none. And it was only until, I remember I told you before, it got to a point when I was at the job and thought, I need to just break the habit of this cycle of what I'm in at the moment. I just saved up a little bit of money. I thought, right, I'm going to go to Australia just by myself. I've never done anything like that. I thought, I'm going to go to Australia by myself. And I just met someone out there that really, in random conversation, for the first time, said the extended part of that sentence, which is jack of all trades, master of none is better than the master of one. And as soon as I heard that, it just shifted my perspective to, this was the sort of time that we spoke about before. I started learning about Action Bronson, started finding out about him and started seeing his business endeavors. Oh, he's an artist, a musician, a rapper, a chef. He paints, he creates. And at the same time, they sort of aligned, and I started realizing the power in being able to dabble in different things. Yes, I like to have a conversation, but I also like to take some photos. I also like to travel a little bit and cook some food. And I started for the first time truly seeing the value in that, right? Being a little bit, not necessarily the best at one thing, but having some diversity to it. And then I started aligning that to my brand, and I started realizing the sky's the absolute limit. And then even when I was flipping, having that shower, and I thought, what's Casuals Corner to me? In my head, I'm saying, I'm going to, as I said earlier, I'm going to travel the world with UFC fighters. I'm going to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm going to be at UFC events through Casuals Corner, not through someone else's work, not through another media outlet. And that's not a bad thing.
No,
it's not a bad thing. 100% not. I just had this really rigid goal in my head of everything I accomplish from this, I want to do it, I want to do it all myself, because of course, as you grow and evolve, you outsource. But I wanted to know that everything was created from me from scratch, because then I can truly just think, right, this is what I'm capable of. So every opportunity that I've got up until this day, I have a little bit of peace of mind knowing I created every opportunity I have. When I'm in Abu Dhabi filming with UFC fighters, or when I'm when I'm getting an exclusive interview with Paddy Pimblett, or filming at Molly McCann's food place, or whatever it may be, I sort of rest a little bit easier knowing everything that I curated was off of my own back. And you said, why Casuals Corner and why that? I think, yes, I was passionate about the sport. Yes, I saw room for growth. Yes, I saw a sport that hasn't even started in the UK. It's not even started. We literally, I said to you the other day, this sport has not even begun in the country.
In the baby years.
It's infancy. I can walk down the street and say MMA. People say, what's that? I say, Conor McGregor. They go, is that the Irish fella?
Yeah, that is literally when you speak to people that don't know the UFC, about, oh, have you heard of the UFC? Or have you heard of MMA? But like, oh, no, what's that? I was like, oh, you know, Conor McGregor, cage fighter. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, it's funny, crazy enough, like how I was speaking to Conor about this. I think it was yesterday, because I watched McGregor Forever again. And like McGregor is a GOAT in his own aspect, because no one has ever captivated the sport like he has. He put MMA on the map. But I don't want to swerve off topic, but there's something so beautiful about, like you're saying, not having any limitations, knowing that everything you worked for was given to you. Sorry, it was earned, not given. That's what I want to say. Everything that you've got has been earned, not given. Nothing came on a silver spoon.
No. And that's the thing that excited me the most. That really excited me the most because, again, it goes back to that why. There are more overarching whys, but it always seems to stem back to that. It gives me, what does MMA give me? What does Casuals Corner give me? Well, it just gives me a blank canvas to say, right, what can we create? What opportunities can we create? Is it a multi-billion-pound company? Is it a small community of like-minded MMA fans? No idea. But the possibilities are literally infinite. And like I said, the sport gives us that flexibility to tap into different things. And I think that's the thing that sort of always majorly excited me. And then it goes back to fulfilling the potential. Now, because the thing is, and I was constantly looking for those things, by the way, because people, I think, again, going back to what we said about a lot of people think that sometimes you have to be passionate in something. I don't think that's always the case. Are you being pushed or are you being pulled? Sometimes you're being pulled. You're passionate about a topic and you want to fulfill your dream. Cool, that's amazing if you can find that. Most people don't always have that, at least at the start. Are you just being pushed out of a bad situation? Don't have a lot of money, I'm losing my house, or my family's lost their job and we needed to. Maybe you're being pushed into something. But that was the key thing for me. It was a sort of a blank canvas to say, right, what can you go and do? Just you, nothing. And I loved the fact that I didn't even know the sport, because even that I had to learn. So it was like the steepest learning curve for me. And I thought, right, every single thing which manifests from this started from zero. And I documented all of it. I've got the screenshots, I've got the videos, I've got the voice notes, I've got the pictures of me just flipping on the first. I've got the stories of going down to my university for my graduation, and I'm looking at all the people that were stressing me out about post-grad jobs and saying, what, you're not applying to here or there? And they're working at Microsoft, they're working at Google. They turn to me and they say, what are you doing? And this was at a time that I started realizing that sort of how you label yourself is how you identify yourself. There's a superpower in that. And it doesn't mean to say, I identify as a bodybuilder, you're going to have a six-pack. Absolutely not. But it begins to subconsciously wire your brain in a way to think like that, to act like that on a day-to-day. So when I turned around and said, I run a media outlet, they go on my Instagram, I've got 13 or 30 followers at the time, the worst posts ever, and they look at me like I'm insane. I sort of found this liberation in that. I kind of enjoyed that moment. In fact, I kind of enjoyed that you get to see it from the start, because then it's also like, give me a couple of years. Just give me a couple of years, because I don't believe I'll be outworked. That's what always my thing was. I just don't know if I'll be outworked.
I think those moments light a fire inside you. 100%. Like, and it's the insanity from some, like, the view of looking like you're insane, but it's not being insane. It's just knowing that when you start off, you don't have to prove it to anyone. You don't have to owe it to anyone. You as long as you're comfortable in your mind that you can see the vision that you want and you know what you have to get there.
True.
You have to make sure in those moments you don't let stuff affect you, because it's hard for you to portray what you're envisioning. It's hard for people to see what you're doing until kind of you get there, really. Because then it's like, once you get there, and again, this is not talking from any experience because we're not there yet, really.
What's there?
But yeah, exactly. What is there? But like, it's funny because people, especially when you're first starting out, people will doubt you. And like I said, I love that. I love that fire that lights in you, because it's like, fucking hell, mate, you have no idea what I'm going to achieve. And that may sound cocky and confident, but that's just a fact. Like, you have to be cocky and confident. I think to believe in yourself so much, you have to have that.
I'll have to be 100% transparent as well, because I actually do think, I know this sounds stupid, but I do sit there sometimes and I do think, I actually wish that I had more people around me that doubted me. I feel like that would give me a little added. I just don't. I just genuinely don't. I'm very grateful for that first and foremost, but
hang on, but you wouldn't want that, I don't think. Why would you want people that doubted you around you?
I don't really, but it does give you a little.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah.
It just does. If you've got people around you saying you can't do that, you can't do that, instantly you just okay. Like you said, it lights that little fire, and that. Now that's motivation, and I always like the saying that motivation is mental candy, which is so true. It's a quick pick me up and it's a good shot in the arm, but that runs out pretty quick. You know, discipline and consistency and repetition, they're the main things. Motivation is good and it has its place. Is mental sweets, essentially. It's a quick pick me up and it will fizzle out very soon. So if you're trying to do anything off the basis of motivation, it's not going to go very far. But my point is, the truth of it is, I didn't really ever have everyone. I'm so grateful to say, I don't know if it was because I spoke with conviction. I don't know if it's just because I sounded so clear thinking in what I wanted to achieve particularly, or if it's because people just had faith in me. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all of them. But whenever I said these things to people, they always 100% had every faith. People that had no idea about the industry. And it comes back to what we spoke about before, because I think this is super true. Has someone done it before? And has someone done it before? So I'm asking myself, well, has someone created their own job and own media outlet? Yeah, someone's done that. Have they done it in sports? Yeah, they've done that. Right. Have they got paid? Yeah, they've done that. It's like, okay, yes, someone may not have done all of these things in MMA, but that blueprint's out there. Someone has done that. And that's why it's so difficult to be a pioneer, because you don't have that North Star to look up to. But so when I'm sitting at home and I'm thinking, okay, my crazy goal is to travel the world and talk about this sport and make money. I was like, that's not that crazy. It's not that crazy, because think about it realistically. Again, referencing Naval Ravikant, he says, if you want one thing, not multiple things, one thing, and you don't want anything else, you'll probably get it. You'll probably get it. Again, it comes back to your why and your priorities. If you want one thing, okay, I want to be financially free. I want to travel the world, talk about MMA, fly my mum first class to different countries and do all that off the back of doing what I love. That's my one thing. I actually don't want anything else. I don't. I literally don't. I don't buy clothes. I don't go out. I don't go even to restaurants. I don't do anything. I just want that. That's all I want, really. That's really, really all I want. I don't want anything else. And I give pretty much every second of my day, from waking up to going to sleep, to that. So always in my head, it was just logical. It wasn't even crazy, irrational. It wasn't wild thinking. It was just logical to me. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have to remember that. Has someone done it before? And it's like, well, if the answer is yes, then it's probably more logical than you actually think, if that makes sense. So I think that was always a major thing for me. Every time I went online, I was seeing people do this. I was thinking, well, it's being done. Yeah. It's literally being done every day. So there's no excuse for me not to do that. You know?
And even it's also, again, coming back to what I was saying before about how as long as you believe it, that's enough. Because there'll be a lot of people, even within the industry, that, I mean, I've had that experience. People in the industry basically say that I should focus on just doing one thing. Which, don't get me wrong, I mean, I did take it a little bit personally, and it did light a fire in me to kind of be like, oh, well, kind of almost like, fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong. Obviously, it might have come from a good place, and it might have come from, because it's just people's capacity. The way people think, the capacity of their minds are very different to everyone else. So for one person, they might say to you, oh, well, it's kind of impossible to get to that capacity. But as long as you just stay true to yourself and you believe it, then I think you're going to be sweet. And I've got to give you your flowers, mate, because the content you make is unreal. You are an absolute savage with the work ethic that you got. Your content is different and you're good at what you do. And like, again, we're young G's in this game, and it's nice to see someone that has, you know, you're so switched on, bro. Your mindset is where it needs to be. And it's just nice to see someone, you know, kind of same age, pushing the same goals. And I fucking love it, man. And I kind of wanted to turn this into, like, my next part is, what do you think about the rest of the media in the combat sports scene? Because we were touching up on it the other day on our DMs, and I kind of wanted to save for this. Well, it's just, I don't know. I think people like me and you, and there are obviously a few other guys as well, who are kind of the young risers, if you like, in the scene. Like I've been to enough events now, whether that's UFC events or like the Ngannou Joshua press conference, especially, where I've just been around like a lot of these traditional media that like a lot of them work for the tabloids, and I just think, mate, half of these guys don't know fuck all, and they just don't fucking give the sport the respect it deserves. I don't think it gives the fighters the respect they deserve, and I just think they just lack kind of their own lane, if you like. Yeah, I kind of wanted to get your opinion on it.
I think the first thing I'll say is, I mentioned this before and I do believe it. When that person said to you, stick to one thing, do one thing, he's right, but with nuance. Right?
Yeah.
Because if he's
someone very, very big as well.
If he spoke to you and you explained what type of personality you are, what type of things you enjoy, what sort of ventures you want to go into. Because this is the awkward thing. This is a little side tangent, but I think it's important. This is a segment which I really dived into on these videos that I made, is really trying to understand who you are a little bit better, because you really will understand what sort of content, what sort of lanes you should go into, because focusing on one thing is 100% the right answer for certain people and certain goals. If you want to become the Mr. Beast of MMA, he's 100% right. You should focus all your time, all your attention on YouTube. If you want to become the Ariel Helwani of MMA, Ariel Helwani didn't get to where he is creating all different types of media and doing all different types of things. He wanted to be the best journalist, and he done nothing else but that. So yeah, if you want to get to the absolute pinnacle of a narrow lane, then 100% you should focus on one thing, 100%. But we speak about this being a 10 plus year plan. Well, how can you be disciplined? How can you be consistent if it's not sustainable? This is always the big thing. Again, it comes back to fitness. Is your diet sustainable? People do these crash diets and wonder why they can never consistently maintain their weight. It's not sustainable. You need a sustainable way of living and eating. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to keep up to it. So for you, maintaining one focus, one fixed idea is never going to be sustainable, because you like to dip into other things. You take interest in other things. So for you, that was horrible advice. But there was no nuance to that conversation, right? Or maybe there was, and maybe he was just wrong. But I think that's important. You're saying, yeah, he is. You're saying, yeah, he is. Well, maybe he's just wrong then. But that's important. I do think that's important to know. Because if you turn around, it's like, I use Mr. Beast as the example. You cannot be the Mr. Beast if you're doing all of these different ventures and dividing your attention. But if you know inherently, like yourself and like me, I like to dip into that. I get bored if I'm focused on one thing. I like to explore. I like to do something artistic. I like to do conversation, whatever it is. Then the answer is going to be very, very different. So again, I think there's always nuance to that. But coming back to, you looked at me like he did know that. And he did. Well, then that is bad advice.
Well, because the thing is, I feel like
then it is bad advice.
I feel like, and again, because of the position that we're still in, like we're still far away from where we want to be. I feel like there is a certain section of combat sports media who are kind of almost like the old G's, if you like, or have kind of been in place for a long time, that almost feel threatened by the younger generation that are coming through now. Yeah.
And why wouldn't you, right? Because ultimately we live in a world now where attention is currency. Fact. Money is not currency anymore. Attention is currency. It really, really is. If you're someone that has ridiculous attention throughout your platforms and throughout your work and throughout your medium of, say, media, you have a lot of leverage. And this is something I was speaking about before, is it all comes down to leverage. Everything is leverage, because leverage is opportunities. The more leverage you have, the more opportunity you have. Guess how many opportunities I got when I had 10 followers on all my platforms? None. Guess what happens when near enough 20 million people walking through your social door every month? a lot more opportunities, right? Because you have a lot more leverage. So I think, yeah, of course, it's natural to maybe feel somewhat threatened or whatnot. But I do believe there's just, again, referencing that book, but he says, one day I hope we live in a world where there's 7 billion people and 7 billion businesses. Because everyone is going to be very different, like we spoke about, right? And everyone is going to have a different angle and a different value to provide. And it's not all going to look the same. So do I believe there's people in the industry who are a little bit archaic, that maybe they aren't all in on MMA, and that reflects sometimes in their work and their medium is a little bit outdated? Yeah, for sure. But do I believe there's people from the older generation within that media that definitely have a lot of value? 100%. You look at someone like Ariel, for example, you have a look at someone like Luke Thomas. They are much more traditional journalists who have actual journalist integrity with their work, right? Which holds a lot of weight. Now, that's not only through the good work that they've done, but that's a 10 plus year brand identity and representation of their work. And again, integrity. So definitely has their place. Do I think there's people coming out from every different angle creating new media within the space? 100%. I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
I really do. I think a really limiting mindset that people have is believing that other people's success is taken away from yours. And I've experienced this. And I would say I have, again, a morsel of success in this, mere morsel. Again, not even touched the surface. But I've already encountered that, where people I've done work with or mutually worked with have seen opportunities that I'm getting and
taking it personally.
Yeah.
There's enough business out there for everyone.
People don't realize the bigger your neighbor gets, the bigger you get. If your goal is to actually get better and improve and grow, because it's only growing the industry. So that all just comes down to insecurity, in my opinion. That 100%. Comes down to an ego issue and insecurity with what you're doing. I appreciated the kind words earlier, but in my head, when you were saying that, my head's absolutely frying itself, because I'm just like, I'm just not agreeing with any of that. I appreciate it for sure.
I know what you mean.
I definitely think there's...
Yeah, because it's almost like the kind of the voice in your head kind of making sure that doesn't go to your head a little bit. And also knowing that like we're still at the surface level of what we want to do. So yeah, I know what you mean.
I think
it's hard to take. I find it sometimes hard to take a compliment.
A compliment is a gift, and it's bad form to refund the gift. So I always appreciate it and I'll always accept it 100%. The reason I say that in my head is because I'm a million miles away from where I see things, that it just doesn't even feel right to even attach compliments to that particular work yet. But again, I appreciate it, and it is certainly very thoughtful. But I think that, going back to what I said, I think that's a problem. When they see other people in a certain space, and it doesn't have to just be in MMA media, when people see other people succeeding, they believe that takes from them. And again, I think that's an insecurity thing,
100%.
Truthfully, because I was actually having this conversation with Nathaniel Wood, for anyone who doesn't know, who is a fighter. And he said when he started to get a bigger name and started to get a big brand and getting into the UFC, he had friends that were jealous and friends that didn't really support that and things of that nature. And to me, that was always different, because I was fortunate enough to always have friends that were not like that. But also, for me, I always found that strange, because for me, myself, I was always, and I still am, 100% confident that I will get mine. I will get mine. So whatever person X, Y, Z does, it's not going to affect what I do. It just isn't. It's not going to affect what I do and what my overarching why is. And it's not going to, someone having success isn't going to take away from my own path, my own journey. And it comes back to that why. Why are you actually doing it? And also having the comfortability in knowing, again, having that individualism. Okay, right, be the best in the world at what you do and refine that till that's true. Well, no one can do Casuals Corner. People take much better photos than me. They do much better interviews. They take much nicer food. For now. But people always will.
Yeah.
They always will.
Well, it's like the whole kind of argument to this is there's enough bread for everyone to eat.
100%.
There's enough bread for everyone to eat. So that negativity and trying to bring people down and that jealousy just does not help anyone. And that's why I kind of like working with people like you. It's just, there's nothing that beats, especially coming up with other people at the same time.
Agreed.
And not letting that ego get involved and like you want your mates to do well.
100%.
You must be so selfish and egotistical for you not to want to see your mates doing well. Or for anyone in the industry. It's like when we work with other people, like, mate, it's sick when you get to work with other people because like I said, there's so many other people that are out there that are super talented. And for you to kind of be in the headspace to think that, oh, I'm the only person that should get this. And it's like, oh, fuck you, mate.
I think that was something as well that I've realized quite recently, to be perfectly honest, that I was super grateful for was that I had friends around me that 100%, like what you said, was happy to see me. I remember coming back from Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, went up there to film with Molly and a friend at his one of his food shops, and then done the interview with Paddy before the Tony Ferguson fight. I came back down from there. My phone was just blowing up after I'd posted some work, and my friends were calling me and they was all buzzing and messaging me and oh my God, that was a sick opportunity. I didn't even comprehend it. It was just, without sounding like an absolute tosser, it literally was another day in the office. It literally was. Yes, those names have a little bit more notoriety, so those people happen to see it because it got so outside of the. I had old bosses even messaging me and saying, "Oh, I saw your interview." It didn't feel like anything to me. It was just another day at the office, but it was nice to sort of feel that support and people around me want to achieve more so than even sometimes I even think of my own self. I'm just getting on with things and they're calling me up like, oh my God, that's sick. And I'm like, I forgot I'd done that.
I think it's especially nice, like you said, when you have people that may not necessarily be viewing your work all the time, that interact with you and give you nice messages in the end. Like I had this week with the Eddie Hearn interview. I had so many nice messages, cool, man. And like, for me, that shit spurs me on to want to do more. Like when you get that much support from people sometimes that you don't even know or have met maybe once or twice and they're showing you love and they're sharing your stuff. It's like, 100%. Fucking hell, man. It's like, this is one of the reasons why we like to do this. We like to make content, yes, for ourselves, but you want people to enjoy what you're doing.
100%.
And when you get nice comments about how good your work is, how good your interview is, man, it makes you feel so good.
I think there's it's a fine balance because it sort of comes back to what you were saying earlier when you was paying me compliments and you said, oh, maybe that's something in your head that's sort of monitoring it. And I think that's important to have online because when you create any work online, when you distribute anything, you don't have to, but I've found a tremendous amount of value in being able to just almost levitate at this medium space where you're not as good as they say you are, you're not as bad as you say you are.
Yeah.
You're going to get some nasty comments, you're going to get some good comments. You never want to get too high, you never want to get too low. And you end up just floating in this middle part because as well, those fluctuations in compliments and negativity, that's emotion. And emotion is a form of energy, whether it's a good one and you get all excited and you're sort of buzzing, which is obviously a positive, but if it's a negative and it bums you out and you're a little bit, again, these are just energies. And I started realizing after a while that if you start reacting to all of these different things with an amount of energy, it's just subtracting away from the goal.
Of course.
And you just realize that it's just, of course, when you get people say nice things, you say thank you and really appreciative, of course, but you almost go into this sort of subconscious, thank you so much. It really means a lot. Thank you for the support. I appreciate it so much. That's my message I would say to people, right? Which I mean it. I do mean it.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm not fluctuating my emotion. Otherwise, you just get caught up in sort of this feedback loop where you're validating yourself of what people are saying, right?
Well, then I think also like, especially with the positive comments, I feel like something that I kind of, maybe sounds a bit cocky, but it's like, it's almost like for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, thank you. But it's like, I also knew I was going to get to this point.
True.
So it's also not shocking.
True.
Which sounds a bit cocky, but I wanted to just give you more flowers, mate, because we spoke about this last time and I didn't want to not bring it up because I think it's really cool. Speaking about being different and doing really cool shit, you have your own comic.
True.
Casuals comic.
Everything works good in alliteration. Casuals is tremendous alliteration with pretty much everything.
Really cool comics, man.
So if you flip that one over, the red one.
The red one.
So I wanted to, so that is actually, it's actually one of my favorite photos because it's from my, funnily enough, look who's on the front page. The man who got the win yesterday, Sam Patterson. So this was the first copy. And I reached out, and there's so many, again, we speak about working with talented people, and there's a lot to even dissect in that. We speak about working with talented people. There's so many talented people in the MMA space or just online in general. And I got some inspiration. I've never been a fan of comics, never read them, literally never cared about them. I thought, oh, that looks cool. I reached out to him. He does incredible work. I said, oh, I'd love to team up on this sort of thing. And I just padded it out with photography that I'd done. And again, it goes back to embracing the differences, right? Because even on one of those pages there, you'll see a poem that I wrote. Now, who's writing poems in the MMA space? This is meant to be a macho space of fighting. Man. And it's weird, right? But again, when I put that out, when I started putting these things out, it started feeling a lot more liberating because I thought, oh, I'm truly at a space now where I don't care. I don't care. I'm so numb. I can't even explain how numb I am to negativity, to not feedback, of course, because there's value in that always, but in other people's perception of things. So much so that I'm in the most masculine dominated things. And I purposefully, I say poems, people think they're love poems or something. I purposefully say poems because I know it provokes a certain soft, gooey emotion in people's head, which is a complete juxtaposition with MMA. I purposefully do that to just evoke more. How many people do you think have gone in the comments and said, that's cringe, I hate that. I don't care.
Fuck you. How about that?
I don't care.
How about that,
But
mate?
it's even something like that. It's just, again, when sort of stumbled across Action Bronson and thing, I thought, right, let me just actually play about with things. Let me expand my interest on things. And in that second one with the green one there, I've got my food series in there. I've got the GBTV that I filmed with Great Britain Top Team. I've got some poems, some photography, and just sort of thrown it all in there. And more so what that is obviously that's a cool little time capsule and whatnot. But it was actually a little bit deeper than that for me, because what that really was, okay, I'm going to create this, whatever this is. Comic. I'm going to create this comic. I'm going to print just a few copies and I'm going to sell just a few copies. And I want whoever has those originals to have those originals. So when it's 10 years time and it's a household name and we're on issue 56 and you cannot and will not get an original episode, I want that to be a little homage to the people that supported the brand back in the day. I want that to be a little bit of a homage to the journey. The first one, yeah, it's not the best, but I just got it out.
It's the first one.
It's the first one, right? And there's almost that beauty.
Was the red one the first one?
The red one's the first one.
Damn, I've got two, mate. He's going to be selling these in a few years.
You have got two. But that's what I sort of wanted to create with that. I wanted to create, I also wanted to create things that made me accountable to the brand. I wanted to be accountable to it. So I've been playing around with, I always wanted to just dabble in clothing for a very, very long time. I've never been a certain fashionista, but I've always just enjoyed what I enjoyed. And I even started playing around with designs and photography and things like that. And again, the main thing with clothing is essentially it doesn't really matter. Of course it does to a certain extent. It doesn't matter about the fabrics and the fibers and the comfortability to a certain degree. It matters about what does that brand say to other people when you're wearing it. That's all a brand does. Every time we put on an item of clothing with a brand, it's saying something to someone else. It's saying who we are, what we like to do.
It's an expression, isn't it?
It's an expression, exactly that. And that's another reason why I even wanted to sort of go into the clothing. I say that I've actually got my t-shirt on it, so I should actually take my jumper off. But so even with this prototype here, this is just me playing about with some photography that I took in on my trip to Thailand. Again, I want to create almost a time capsule to be accountable to that. Right, okay, this clothing means absolutely nothing to no one. But what can I make that in 10 years? What significance can I put on that? Because I personally would like casuals to connote an idea of a casual. having the freedom and the ability to be a casual in everything, whether it's design, whether it's photography, things I've never done before, whether it's MMA, whether it's talking on camera, things you've never done before, but embracing starting the journey, being the worst you're ever going to be and getting better at it. So yes, I want to get into some clothing. Yes, I want to create casuals, but it's deeper than that. You said, what's casuals? Why do I want it? Well, I want casuals in 10 plus years to be every time you see someone with that, every time you see someone wearing the brand, it's got a subliminal meaning that's, I actually don't really care what other people necessarily think. I'm going to just start something. I'm going to enjoy the process. I'm going to understand that it's going to take a long time, that I have to get my reps in, get my hands dirty and get better at it. So yeah, I wanted to experiment with these things, but I also want to have that accountability back to what Casuals Corner originally is. That is the overarching goal for it. So I know it goes a little bit
That's beautiful, bro. It really is beautiful. Like I said, like the way your mind's structured, you're very business driven, you're very creative, you've got so many avenues. I love that because that's something I kind of want to strive towards myself. So I will be honest, I take inspiration from the way you are and the ideas you have. It's fucking unreal, man. Do you mind just pausing? I really need a wee.
Bro, go for it.
One.
No, go for it. I had to whip off my jumper quick.
We're back, mate. Oh, my legs are fucked. I did leg day yesterday. I've always.
What's that?
Well, so I've never really lifted weights. Like I've always kind of avoided it. And obviously getting back into fighting, and I need to build my strength back up. And I've always been one of those to avoid leg day as well. If I was going to lift any weights, it definitely wouldn't be legs. But yeah, I did a good HIIT workout yesterday. My legs are fucked, mate. But it's good, man. This, like, you know, you were saying before about how you always had this feeling if you didn't like how you looked. I've kind of near enough had that a long time as well. I've always looked at myself and thought I was too skinny as well. And not that I want to get fucking wham this year, but I want to get strong. I want to fight again this year. Would you ever have a fight?
I get asked this question a lot, as you can imagine, just being in the space that I'm in. And I always have the same answer because, again, it's what I was referencing earlier with the mindset. My mindset for competition has changed so much that I have started just enjoying more individual sports, even stupid things like I've started playing tennis more with my friend because, as stupid as that sounds, number one, it's an individual game, but every point is a small mental battle. I know it's just a silly game of tennis I'm playing with my mate and whatnot on the surface, but deep down, it's a little bit more to that. And it goes back to your original question is, I always want to, and I certainly will. But for me, I would not take that lightly. I would not take that lightly. I would prepare correctly. I would train correctly. And I would want that to be my number one priority. I don't even care if it's an amateur first fight. I don't care. I would want that to be my number one priority.
Fighting is completely different to any other sport. It's not a game where you can be half in, half out.
This is it.
Like, you'll get hurt. And I think you should have a fight, man. I think one thing that I think has helped propel me to maybe be in the space a lot better with fighters is that when I lived in Liverpool and I trained, there was almost a level of respect that I got for other fighters for actually going in there. And even like, even though it's not at any high level, the fact that you're in there, you're willing to go to the trenches, you're willing to get punched in the face, you're willing to see how hard it is. I found that I had it was like a different level of respect that you'd get compared to like just covering the sport and not doing it.
For sure.
And sorry to interrupt you, but I really want to. I mean, did you watch Misfits last night?
I didn't,
mate.
I didn't.
Honestly,
you want to get on there,
mate? Mams Taylor, get me a fight on Misfits this year. I will knock out anyone that you put in front of me, and I'll sell the fight as well. I honestly believe. I mean, credit to anyone that steps in the ring. There's a lot of these guys that are in there that don't, that I don't know whether they're not either they're not preparing correctly or whether they're just not having really tough tests. But I'd like my chance in the Misfits ring. I reckon I could knock someone out, and I know I can do it. And it's just fucking good exposure, really, at the end of the day. But Mams Taylor, sign me up, mate. I want to fight this year, and I'll knock anyone that you put in front of me, and I'll sell the fight.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. But going back to what you said, 100%, I would like to. But like you said, it's not something you can play. It's not something, it's not football. I can't rock up, have a little stretch and get involved. It's something that I would commit time to. And again, it comes back to a priority thing. It's what I've been speaking about earlier. What's my priority? Everything. This is my priority at the moment. So I always say that I want to, but I'm looking at the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and I'm just thinking, at what point is that actually going to shift where I actually have more freedom to step back and do things like that? Maybe it looks like that in 2 years, in which case I most certainly will, but maybe it doesn't. But either way, you're 100% right in regards to getting a better feel for the sport, because I've done a little bit of training here and there with my friends. I'm fortunate enough that they do a lot of training, so they teach me a few bits, and we've done some light drilling and sparring and rolling and striking and whatnot, just a real surface level amount. But number one, of course, that helps with even just understanding how flipping tiring it is, if nothing less, just how flipping tiring it is to grapple a little bit and to strike a little bit. Not for 5 rounds at championship pace, just a little bit in your mate's garage, essentially. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And also it helps you understand, like, I think for me, like, when you're a casual and you're first in the sport and you watch it for the first time and don't really understand what's going on, you look at the grappling. A lot of people that don't understand it are like, they're just laying on each other. And it's like, mate, once you then actually do it, the level of respect you then have,
for sure,
and the level of understanding you have for the grappling is that you can appreciate the beauty of it a lot more. And
100%.
So, mate, jiu-jitsu is literally a language of the body. It's unreal, mate. The amount of intricacies, the amount of it's just so, I mean, not to take anything away from striking, because I'm a massive striking guy. I love to strike.
You just called out the whole Misfits roster, so
mate,
you'd like to think so.
But like, jiu-jitsu is, I don't know whether you can say one is harder than the other, but jiu-jitsu is definitely a lot. Like, the way I see it is, obviously with striking, anyone can kind of land a big haymaker. No matter how skilled you are in striking, someone has got that ability. One flush punch. Yeah. With jiu-jitsu, you don't really get fluke submissions. It just does not happen. You are, like, if you are against another guy who doesn't know what he's doing and someone knows what they're doing, it's game over.
There's no haymaker submissions. Yeah, no. You're not just catching people in gnarly things. But it's definitely true. And I think, like you said, training definitely gives you that perspective. I think for me, the next best thing for that, where I don't do that consistently, for me, is I'm on the mats every week with probably one of the best gyms in Europe, and I've got a very good relationship with the coaches. So I think even just obviously being friends with these people and also being an empathetic person, can you put yourself in other people's shoes? That doesn't mean you're going to necessarily understand every nuance and detail. 100% not. 100% not. And I'm not sitting here saying you do. But if you actually have half an empathetic cell and you're spending time on the mats and you're talking to the coaches and you're talking to your friends and you're understanding more, you're interviewing these people, you're learning more about the emotions, you just get a completely different perspective. Even literally just standing on the side of the mats as I'm filming, it's just being in the gym. How many people, again, like I said, it's not the exact same thing as training consistently or even definitely not competing consistently, but I do wonder how many people in this space are more so just in front of a webcam creating YouTube videos and speaking on it. And I think that would change a lot of it comes back to, you ask about the MMA space. I want everyone to get theirs, and however you do that is cool. Whether you do it in how I would personally go down, there's a lot of people out there I would never create videos in a style of MMA guru. I could never sit there and rinse fighters consistently. Well,
that's what I mean. I feel like there is a section of the space, and it's not a small section. It's massive. It's a big section of people that just kind of these fucking virgins, really, right? Who just sit there and slate fighters and talk like they fucking know what they're talking about. And it's like, mate, you shut the fuck up, honestly. So like, and I mean, well, saying that in a nice
that with
way,
all respect.
but it's true. Like, it is amazing how many people just sit there, never trained, never got in a fight, and will just sit there and just spew shit and just fucking shit on fighters. It's like, mate, have the decency to fucking actually get in there and understand the sport and understand the fighters before spouting shit.
The thing I definitely got to go on record and say though is I certainly wouldn't make content like that because I'm different to him. He's different to me. Like we spoke about earlier, everyone's going to have a different lane, but don't get it twisted. He's sitting in a house that he's purchased doing a job that he loves, that he gets paid for full time. All respect. Absolutely all respect. You're following your passion. You're getting paid for it, and you're essentially living the life you want to live. 100%. I think the world would be a better place if more people could do that. So all respect. Are you doing things in a way that I wouldn't? I would, sorry. No, but that's okay. We're all different. I'm doing things that he probably wouldn't want to do and whatnot. And you have to sort of pick your poison as well because again, it's understanding your why. I keep going back to it. But if your why is, okay, I want to interview fighters. I want to... Imagine if I took the approach of... I said this to my friend yesterday. Imagine if I took the approach of MMA Guru and I went to Abu Dhabi with Nathaniel and I'm sitting in the fighters lobby. I've got flipping Kamaru Usman there, Khamzat Chimaev there. And I've just been slandering them for the best part of 2 years. And he goes super viral. So they all see it. I can't have those opportunities. I wouldn't have those opportunities, nor would I want to put myself in a position where I could do that. I'm very comfortable in the fact that you do well to go through the entirety of my history of my page and find something which even comes under the remit of trolling, because there's always this respect to it first and foremost, but also there's this level of professionalism that I'm trying to uphold as well. I do things in a casual way, quite literally. In a more sort of friendly way, a bit more relaxed, not complete journalist angle. But also, there's always this respect. I'm never going to completely just dog people. I'm never going to speak out of turn on things. I'll always give a balanced view, 100%. But again, I think it's coming back to what do you actually want? Because yeah, it's all cool to make viral videos and troll these fighters and do this. That's honestly, if you make a living and you do that and that's how you want to do it, cool. I'm no judgment here whatsoever. But just know that you're not going to get opportunities like being able to go to these events and meet these fighters and speak to them. And if you don't want to do that, it's absolutely cool. You know what I mean? It's just understanding your sort of lane, because I sort of got a similar question to that the other day. And what's your opinions on MMA Guru? I thought, all respect to him. He's literally sitting in a house that he bought talking about MMA. That's pretty sweet. I know a lot of people that would quite happily do that for a career. So I think it's pretty cool, to be perfectly honest.
Fair play to him, but again, it's just like...
Not my angle.
Yeah, it's not my angle. It's like... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I can... Like, obviously, fair play to him for achieving all of that, but then it's like, mate, realistically, real people in the space aren't rating you for what you're doing. Like, most fighters aren't going to want to speak to him, or most fighters aren't going to want to give them their time or be real with them.
Maybe that's not his goal.
True.
This is my point, right? Yeah. It's all just understanding what you're trying to get out of it. He's created a cult-like following. He sits in his house and does impressions for money, and don't get it twisted. He's got a good knowledge of the sport. He actually does. You listen to him when he's being a bit more serious, actually breaking down fights. Fantastic knowledge, really extensive knowledge. I actually would wish he did a lot more of that because I could actually follow him a bit more closely. But a lot of it is just... There's a lot of things that just don't really sort of align to me. But again, absolutely cool. You don't have to love everyone. That's not the world. Again, it comes down to nuance. I can happily coexist. I can happily see him doing successful. It's not taking anything away from me. But coming back to your experience the other day, because I wanted to ask you, what was that like? Because I was watching your videos and it was cool first and foremost seeing it in real life, because it's obvious that you have a comfortability and a presence on the mic that a lot of people don't have. And that's a combination of repetition, 100%. And that's also, there's some natural ability there as well. So what was actually like that experience? Because that was a major event. Well, literally one of the biggest sporting events in the world at the moment. So
thank you. It was mad. First off, shout out to Jamie Ward, because he's the one that got me in there. He's the guy that does the Matchroom presenting in the UK and all the DAZN boxing events in the UK.
Nice.
Really, really talented man. I mean, Jamie's a really solid guy. So shout out to Jamie if you watch this. But it was a bit surreal, to be honest, because I don't know whether you have it But like, it's mad that people say to me how I've got this knack for obviously speaking well. And it's crazy because every time I do an interview, almost, my mind is going at 1,000,000 miles per hour in my own head. Like the Eddie Hearn interview, the first question, I could not get my words out. I was like I could not, because I overheard him talking about Ngannou and how he doesn't think that Ngannou would necessarily do well against other top 10 heavyweights and how the British title would be a difficult fight for him. And I just could not articulate my words. I just got stuck on the first question. So, I mean, and that might not necessarily be visible to the naked eye. But it's just like I have these constant battles when I'm interviewing. I mean, it was unreal. The press conference was really, really good. It's going to be a huge event in Saudi. Massive fight for Ngannou. And like, funny enough, I only prepared for Eddie Hearn. Like I prepared for interviewing Ngannou and AJ and Frank Warren. Didn't get any of those. And then the other interviews I did with Dan Hardy, Dewey Cooper, and Josh Denzel, they were completely all off the cuff, no preparation. And the Dewey Cooper one was really cool because he's such a solid guy, such a nice guy. And he reposted my question and said it was the best question that he's been asked in a long time. And to get that recognition from someone who has, been asked countless of questions over the last couple of years, that was almost like probably one of the nicest compliments I've ever had doing this, to be honest. And more just kind of, is it gratification that I'm doing the right thing? So yeah, it was a cool event. Yeah, validation. Yeah, and like I said, this is just the beginning. Like these are the moments that I think I'll look back on and kind of maybe were somewhat of a turning point, because I feel like the Eddie Hearn interview is definitely the biggest interview I've done so far, and it's almost kind of like, okay, look, like I can do this on a big stage now. So I guess, I don't know whether I answered your question, but yeah, it was just a surreal experience, man. And I hope to do more of them.
I 100% resonate to when you said about doing a couple on the fly. That's exactly what I had when I went to Next Gen. And I was spending the day with Molly. I've worked with her before. She's such a lovely girl. I've got a good relationship with her. Yeah. And this is at a point where Paddy's not really doing any media. He's got one of the biggest profile fights in MMA coming up in Tony Ferguson. He is one of the biggest profile names in the sport. And I'm never one to get starstruck, and I certainly wasn't, or anything like that. But I used to before just had this nervousness to me where I wouldn't pull the trigger sometimes, and I'd regret it when I got home. I didn't ask them for an interview. I was clammed up a little bit. But I saw him, I spoke to him, and I just said, I wouldn't suppose you have sort of 5 minutes just to have a quick chat. He was, yeah, of course. Hadn't prepared anything. Hadn't thought of any questioning whatsoever. And we sort of just cracked on, done it there and then. And in my head, I thought, hold up a second. This is the biggest interview I've ever done. The most people are going to see this. One of the biggest fights on the biggest fight card of this year, essentially, just before the year ends. I've not got a clue. And then you start realizing, like you said, your mind's going 1,000,000 miles an hour. I think when I started actually getting better at it, it was because I got more comfortable in holding the space. Just holding the space, just slowing down. And as stupid as it is, having a conversation, actually having a conversation. Because if there's two things, I thought to myself, if there's two things I know, it's how to have a chat and about MMA.
Yeah.
So let's not overthink this at all. And of course, when I finished the interview, I thought, flipping hell, I could have asked this, and done.
Which is natural. The amount of times that happens is like,
course,
you're always going to think you should have done this or asked this. But I think it comes down to as well, the reps. The reps is a massive one.
It's all reps.
And just humanizing people. Like, we are just people. Like, and just seeing them for a person as opposed to this person on a pedestal.
Yeah. And having a conversation.
Yeah. And I think maybe my experience, and you could maybe potentially relate about having these interviews where they're completely off the cuff. There's almost no time to think about the pressure.
True.
Because you're just straight in.
True.
And it's fight or flight.
You go into this, well, it's you hear fighters talk about this flow state. It's a similar thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go into this flow state. You just go into this conversation. You watch Ariel on his show. You watch Joe Rogan on his show. Everyone looks at them as they're the gold standards. So they should. They're unbelievable at what they do. They've also had 20 years in this game.
Yeah.
And I personally, when I got into this space and I knew that I would start speaking in front of the camera, never done that before. When I would start speaking to professionals and interviewing, never done that before. I realized that, okay, I'm actually going to have to go away and number one, study myself, my bad tendencies, bad habits, bad attributes in conversation and podcasting and whatnot, but also study these people and what they do and how they do it. And yes, it comes down to reps, and it also comes down to actually being self-aware enough to, number one, get feedback. Number two, to actually listen to your own mistakes. For me personally, it was a pace thing. Where I'm from and my friendship circle speak so fast, no one could understand me. So much so that when I was even at university, that was the first thing that this girl said to me when I walked in my seminar. She was from Surrey. She wasn't from far away. She was an hour down the road. Said, I have no idea what you're saying. No idea. And that was a shock to me because it was very surprising. And then when I listened to a conversation back, I'd said like 9 million times. And I knew that because I had to edit it out. And you just start picking up on these things and you start realizing, right, we see Joe Rogan, we see Ariel Helwani, but we don't see the 10 years below the iceberg.
Of course.
We see the tip of the iceberg. And like you said, your mind's going a million miles an hour. But I think ultimately for me, what it was is a number of things. But then I started to realize as well, hold up, again, this is my platform. This is why I created my own brand, because I hold all the accountability. I don't have to be responsible for holding a particular standard to someone else and stressing about how it sounds or what it looks like or did I get the right answers or not. This is mine. If it's crap, it's crap.
So be it.
And that's the beauty of when you have your own brand. You hold all the leverage, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
You hold all the leverage, but you hold all the accountability. And there's this beauty in it because you don't, for me personally, everyone's different. I used to just always hate having this sort of subconscious level to reach or making sure I wasn't going to disappoint someone with a particular piece of work. And that's a terrible way to go into things because it's like going into a football match, telling yourself, right, okay, don't lose, don't lose, don't lose, don't lose, instead of how are we going to win? It's a completely different mindset. And as soon as I sort of shifted that and I got more comfortable in myself first and foremost, but then you get more comfortable, like I said, holding the space to actually think. Your mind's moving a million miles an hour, but you don't ever realize you can pause and think and articulate a question.
That's definitely the
and
biggest
there's a power
thing.
to that.
100%. My mate Tom used to always tell me I used to speak too quickly. It's because I think when you first start off, you think that that there couldn't be any breaks.
Nope. I thought this is awkward.
And also when you're new to the interviewing and you're feeling kind of the pressure of doing it yourself, those small pauses feel like they're fucking 10 minutes long. And especially in this game, you need to be able to be articulate. You need to be able to pronounce your words properly. You need to be able to come across that you can speak well. Like I can mumble quite a lot sometimes. I'm pretty bad for it. But I guess it's all part of the journey, man. Like there's no, like I've always said, I'm not going to delete any videos on my page. They're all going to be up there because one day it'd be nice, like, when things do go well, people can then literally go back and literally see it all from the beginning and think, oh, well, like you said, we can see him at the tip of the iceberg, but it was never that good. Like this is a skill where I'm still learning.
Of course.
I'm still far from having it figured out. Like even the commentating, like it was so funny. The last show that we did, we had Billy Adams on, who is turning pro. He's fighting on the Kingdom card that we're doing at the BC Arena in Manchester. Really, really, really nice guy. And it was me, him, and Brett Baker doing the live pre-show for the event. And Billy was like, oh, I'm like, I just really hope I don't swear. Like I just really hope I don't like cock it up. I'm like, mate, honestly, don't stress about it. It's not ever going to happen. Even if it does happen, it is what it is. But you're not going to swear. Don't worry. What do I do, mate? I fucking swear about 5 minutes into it. And it's like, it's funny, but like, as long as you don't put too much pressure, like I'm going to make mistakes. Like, and especially when you're like we have the ability to do this and it's not live and stuff, but like when it's live, that's an even more added pressure. It's like, fuck, this is live. I really have to make sure everything is articulate, everything is sound well. So yeah, it's a skill I'm still learning, man. And it's a skill I'm sure you're still learning.
I think as well, I kind of like that sometimes because it puts you in that fight or flight state 100%, and it forces you into that flow state. And it also forces you to be what I love about those particular things. The first time that I ever spoke to a big crowd, I remember it was at university and we had to do an elevator pitch in front of the whole cohort. So there was about 100 people and it was a Dragon's Den approach. So they brought in actual dragons. So these multi-millionaires from local businesses and whatnot in Bournemouth area. And we had to do an elevator pitch for 2 minutes on a product, give the finances and whatnot as well, and deliver it. And whoever won got prize or whatnot. I remember there was 100 people there. And I remember thinking when I was writing it, I kind of want to stand out, but I don't really know how. I thought the product was pretty good, to be perfectly honest. Ironically, I spoke about coming up with me and my mum sitting there watching Dragon's Den when I was 8-9 years old. It was actually the idea that we came up with then, contextualized to now, which I actually regurgitated in the modern day, which they happen to love. But I remember I was like, let me just do it in full rhyme. Why not? Let me just do a full elevator pitch, no cards, no nothing, off the top of the dome in full rhyme. Let me just run it. And there's this intensity to the moment where there's not a lot of times in our life on a day-to-day. People don't realize this. We live our day-to-day on the subconscious. We don't make any conscious decisions in most of our lives. We really don't. We think we do, but we don't. We get up, we have a shower, we brush our teeth, then we have breakfast, get in the car, put in gear, drive to work. We do all these things, but we're not really making many decisions. When you're thrust into a situation like that, when you have a live hot mic and you're truly present. You are truly present, or at least you should be. And then it really dials you in. And then, like you said, it's a bit of a sink or swim, but it comes back to sort of being, yes, present, but also being comfortable. So yeah, okay, I can make mistakes, but it's owning that.
Yeah.
And I've referenced it a couple of times, but it always makes me think of Action Bronson's Tiny Desk. You know, the bit when he messes up and he just like that in the middle, and he just start over, just holds the space. And he says, I'm not doing it if it's not right. And there's a power to that.
Having no humility. The SD cards are about to go, mate. So I'm going to wrap this up.
For sure.
2024, what do you want to achieve?
I think over the next 12 months, I'm in the process of actually getting out now a digital educational platform on my TikTok. So I would like to scale that at mass, first and foremost. I'm working at my first 1FC event in Lumpini Stadium in Bangkok. So I'd like to go document that, make food fighter episodes out there. And I would like to earn 6 figures for sure in this year, in 12 months for certain. 6 figures in the business with this year, and bring out at least one item of clothing is what I'd like to do.
I love it. Well, thank you for your time, brother.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to see you achieve some great things.
Sure.
It's beautiful to be on the same journey as you and to see you all flourish. It's going to be an amazing journey to see you achieve all these things, and it's been an honor to have you on. Where can people find you?
Casuals Corner MMA on absolutely everything. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, I am there. Keep it casual.
Peace.